The storm came without warning. The sky turned black over the ancient world. 2 by 2, the animals walked in, every creature found its place. The rain fell for 40 days. The earth beneath disappeared. Then came the dove, then came the olive branch, then came the rainbow. But buried beneath this familiar story lies a deeply unsettling question. Scholars have wrestled with this for centuries, and most never find peace. Who exactly was left behind? And more importantly, why? Something massive stood on the shore that day, watching the ark sail away. They pressed against the gate, but the gate would not open for them. God himself closed the door. That detail changes everything. The storm was not random. It was the most deliberate act in human history. This is the story of the Great Exclusion, and it begins in Genesis 6. Before the flood, there was a civilization unlike anything that came after. Genesis chapter 6, 4 verses that have haunted theologians for millennia. The sons of God descended. Something crossed a boundary it was never meant to cross. The daughters of man were there, and the sons of God saw them. What happened next was not romance. It was a violation of the created order. From that union came something the world had never seen. The Nephilim. They were not simply tall. They were a different category of being entirely. They towered over the ancient cities. Entire civilizations trembled beneath them. Look into the eyes of a Nephilim. You see something that should not exist. They moved across the earth like a conquering force. Unstoppable. Unchallenged. Ancient murals confirm it. Warriors of impossible scale carved into stone walls. Stand a human beside a Nephilim. The comparison is almost incomprehensible. Their very name means fallen ones. Beings who brought heaven crashing into earth. Corruption did not spread slowly. It consumed the ancient world like wildfire. The boundary between the divine and human was not just crossed, it was shattered. There was a world before all of this. A world of innocence and created order. And then there was the world after. Smoke, chaos, and irreversible decay. God looked down at what his creation had become. And he grieved. Below the surface, the corruption ran deeper than anyone could see or measure. But one man remained. Noah, described as blameless in his generations. While the world decayed around him, Noah carried the light of the original design. On one side, a faithful family. On the other, the fallen ones. No middle ground. The ancient world map was almost entirely consumed by darkness and corruption. The spiritual infection was invisible but total. Every heart, every city, every nation. God saw what had been broken, and he began to plan the great recreation. The ark was never just a boat. It was a vessel set apart for a holy purpose. A covenant was coming. The rainbow had not yet appeared, but it was already planned. Separation is not cruelty. In the Bible, separation is the first act of creation itself. God had a blueprint. Every cubit, every room, every detail was intentional. The door of the ark stood open. But not for everyone. Grace has always had a threshold. What God was doing was not random cruelty. It was divine quarantine. The Nephilim reached for the gate. The gate did not move. Not even an inch. Justice is not anger. In God's hands, the scales are always perfectly balanced. Noah's lineage was pure, not perfect, but uncontaminated by the fallen bloodline. The Nephilim were the antithesis of everything the ark was built to preserve. Inside the ark, holiness reigned. It was consecrated ground on water. To bring a Nephilim aboard would be to carry the infection into the new world. Imagine a virus still present in the cure. That is exactly what God refused to allow. The infection does not negotiate. It spreads until something stops it completely. The barrier was not a wall of stone. It was a wall of divine purpose. Even in their final moments, the Nephilim refused to bow. That was always their nature. Broken weapons on the ground. The rebellion was over before it truly began. God's judgment is never a blunt force. It is a scalpel. Precise, intentional, merciful. 2 bloodlines, 2 destinies. Only one was chosen to carry the future forward. The gate was closed, and in that closing, the future of humanity was sealed safely inside. God raised his hand, not in anger, in surgical, purposeful, redemptive decision. The door closed. That final sound echoed through all of human history. Chaos raged outside. Peace reigned within. The contrast was absolute and deliberate. God did not invent separation in the flood. He established it at the dawn of creation. The covenant between God and Noah was ancient, even before the rain fell. Holiness was the protection. The walls glowed not with paint, but with divine purpose. A brutal act of mercy. A thorn on the outside so the flower could bloom inside. And so the new world began to take shape, even before the old one disappeared. The messianic lineage, the thin golden thread of salvation, had to be preserved. The waters rose without mercy. Everything the corruption had built was swallowed. The Nephilim stood their ground at the end. Giants do not retreat, they face the flood. Beneath the dark waters, the fallen ones returned to the earth they had corrupted. The ark rode the chaos like it was built for exactly this. Because it was. Lightning split the sky, the storm reached its peak. Creation was being undone. Inside the ark, Noah's family sat in stillness. Outside, the world ended. God did not watch without feeling, but he watched without wavering. Separation is not new. Light and darkness were divided on the very first day. Across the ancient world, every culture remembers this flood. They cannot forget it. The hourglass shattered, the old age ended, a new one was about to begin. God's judgment was never scattered. Every drop of rain fell exactly where it was meant to. Through the cracked and broken earth, a seed was pushing upward toward the light. That seed was the messianic promise. Thin as a thread, but it could not be broken. From Noah to Abraham, from Abraham to David, from David toward the Messiah. Brutal mercy. That is the only phrase that fits. A thorn that makes the flower possible. A child stood in the ark's light. The future of all humanity. Preserved in wooden walls. The closed door cast a shadow. The shadow looked like a cross. That was not an accident. Slowly, gently, the waters began to pull back. Hope does not announce itself loudly. The dove returned, an olive branch in its beak. The earth was ready to begin again. The rainbow appeared, not as decoration, as a signed covenant from God himself. New land broke the surface. Green and gold and alive. The recreation was complete. Noah stepped onto dry ground. The first human footstep on a cleansed and reborn earth. God's hands extended downward over the fresh new world. Blessing, not judgment. Now, the earth was clean. Every trace of the corruption had been washed completely away. A seed pressed into new soil. The promise of the Messiah. Planted in fresh ground. The ark rested on the mountain. Its mission finished. Restoration was complete. We live in a world that still needs recreation. Look around. You can feel it. Someone is always standing at a window, asking what this broken world is becoming. The real question is not about the Nephilim. It is about what you allow through your door. What are you holding onto that God is asking you to release before the new season begins? Grace does not just cover your past. It is actively building your future right now. One step toward the light. That is all it takes to begin walking into the transformed life. Noah found grace, not because he was perfect, because he was willing and faithful. The story of the Nephilim and the ark is not finished. Your chapter is still being written.